Watch this.
Idaho's new laws are beginning today, meaning happy endings might be blocked. What was supposed to screen minors from accessing certain content could leave a lot of adults feeling blue. How about all the other laws beginning today, like the ones that won't make you blush? Don't worry, we'll chat about some of those too.
So when they built the canals, they thought, oh, it'll just all go down into the lava rock and come out the canyon wall. Well, some of it did.
But most of the irrigation water in Twin Falls didn't run off very well. We're taking a look back at the waterlogged worry that almost sunk the city and the underground idea to fix it. All right, 1st of July, the beginning of the fiscal year in Idaho. It also marks the day the state busts out its new laws. July 1st, maybe the first time you've heard of some of these new rules that may or may not apply to you. And this might be a good time to point out Henry and those of his age, earmuffs. You know, whatever you do with your own time is your business. But as of today, that business is not being done with a certain purveyor of pornography. Speaking of amorous Congress, Idaho's legislature passed and Idaho's governor signed a bill that now requires online porn publishers and distributors to verify the age of those who visit their site. Now, this is to avoid minors from sliding in and being exposed to harmful content on the internet. Sure, but to be clear, this is not the same as the harmful materials in the libraries law. But because of this other law, Pornhub is pulling out of Idaho, meaning starting today, Idahoans can no longer service themselves with their service. Hunter Funk has the provocative particulars.
Pull up Pornhub and you'll get this. A landing page for users in Idaho explaining why it's pulling out, not allowing anyone to view its videos. It says, quote, your elected officials in Idaho are requiring us to verify your age before allowing access to our website. While safety and compliance are at the forefront of our mission, giving your ID card every time you want to visit an adult platform is not the most effective solution for protecting our users. It goes on to say it could put your privacy at risk, that the decision will drive traffic to sites with far fewer safety measures, and that they've made the difficult decision to completely disable access to the website in Idaho. Representative Julianne Young is a co-sponsor for House Bill 498, which requires online pornographic publishers and distributors to get an age verification from a user. She says it passed the House and Senate with flying colors in March.
Yeah, I think this was one of the most exciting bipartisan efforts in the legislature this year to support and protect Idaho kids.
Young says Idaho is one of many states with similar legislation.
It's a problem that's recognized nationwide and that states all across the country are taking steps to address.
Dozens of states, including Utah, Kansas, Indiana, and Montana, have enacted a similar policy. Idaho's law is nearly identical to the one implemented in Texas. While Pornhub is refusing to operate since the bill passed, those who continue to operate will have to confirm the age of users by scanning an ID, credit card, or gaining access to social media to give the proof of age.
We're not picking at the details of the business, but we are saying you have to conduct business in a way that prevents harm.
If the sites don't implement this policy, the law allows minors and parents to sue for statutory damages of at least $10,000. Young says there will always be bad actors pushing people to unregulated sites.
And there are people out there who just want to do whatever it is that's harmful, and they do tend to find a way around it. But our hope is to better protect those kids who are just the innocent victims of this stuff. We can't stop everyone who wants to do bad things, but we can put reasonable measures in place to protect the innocent kids that might stumble onto it.
Despite Pornhub pulling out and left unsatisfied, Young says she doesn't expect anything to change because she says it's working successfully in several states.
Early sexual exposure to these kinds of materials can cause some real problems for our kids. And so this is just a common sense protection for kids who do not have the maturity to navigate some of these issues in the way that adults can.
Now, I reached out to Pornhub to see if they have any plans to ever come back online for Idaho users. I have not heard back yet.
Okay, so obviously they're not the only ones here, but what is considered a pornographic site according to the law?
Yeah, I thought this was really interesting. It's websites where at least 1/3 of their content is considered pornographic. No, those are the ones that are going to need those ID checks.
Okay, so I guess for a lot of people who use this one, it's now back to just Netflix and chill.
Chill.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Hunter. Okay, so 327 other bills were signed into law this past legislative session, the vast majority of which began enforcement today as well. We touched on a few of those last week, but Joe Paris, he's going to walk us through a few other gem state laws going into effect that could affect you.
Hundreds of drug overdoses from fentanyl put pressure on Idaho lawmakers to do something about the growing drug crisis. In just 2022 alone, close to 200 Idahoans died from a fentanyl overdose.
Don't come here, and that's the word, and it is a real thing. They go someplace else. Cartels go to where it's easy business. That's how it will go.
So now into Idaho law, House Bill 406. Lawmakers passed mandatory minimums on fentanyl. So any person arrested with at least 4 grams of fentanyl or any mixture of substances containing a detectable amount of the drug is now guilty of a felony with a mandatory minimum sentence of 3 years in prison and a fine of $10,000 with escalating penalties for even more possession.
This bill demands incarceration without making any distinction between dealers and users, without making any distinction between first-time people who made a mistake and serious bad guys. It doesn't even require knowledge. It requires that you have knowledge that you possess something, but you could think you possess something else and not even know it's been laced with fentanyl, and you would still get caught up in this mandatory minimum.
In the child protection sphere, Idaho lawmakers created a new law to make sure that parents or guardians know their rights. Now, anytime the Department of Health and Welfare investigates potential child abuse, neglect, or abandonment, they must tell parents about their rights, which include refusing to answer questions, the right to get an attorney, the right to refuse entry into their home or property, and the right to refuse questioning of their kids at their house or on their property unless there's a court order. And these notifications, they must be provided in writing within 72 hours of the first in-person contact.
Health and Welfare thought this is a good idea, so they actually came up with this handout that you'll see that notifies parents, and they have been doing this. And so now what we want to do is just codify what they've been doing.
Cash is king, goes the old saying, and a new Idaho law ensures that agencies of the state of Idaho must accept payments for any transactions in cash. And they can't add any extra fees for people choosing to use the paper money.
You can remove healthy sexual organs, but you can never create the healthy sexual function of the opposite sex in an individual who is not that sex. It's scientifically impossible.
Lawmakers also decided that public funds cannot be used for transgender medical treatments like gender-affirming care. That includes state employees using health insurance and for adults that are covered by Medicaid. Republicans have branded the law as protecting tax dollars from costly procedures. Democrats and people we heard from at the State House argue it is shamefully singling out an already vulnerable Idahoan.
It isn't blocking specific medications. It's blocking specific identities of people from accessing medication that everyone else gets access to.
So these laws, some of them will end up in the court system, and we'll keep you posted on all of that. But also fresh for July 1, a new license plate. Not this one. How about that one? The State Board of Education will be the beneficiary of the Gadsden Don't Tread on Me license plate. No step on snake. This legislation further establishes a firearms safety grant fund and program for the purposes of firearms safety education. That is a mock-up that I made. Thank you, Brian. I know it's fantastic.
I don't think that's how it's going to look, but we'll go with it.
Graphic design is my passion. I'll tell you this, though. So the law went into effect today, but you can't go get a nice license plate with the snake on it, the Don't Tread on Me flag, until January 2025. But these bad boys are solid, so it'll last you a good long time.
Good. As we pointed out when that law was passed and signed, it's like now you have government's permission to go support a government program. So
yes,
even though
that's right,
promoting the government not to be part of your life.
Wow, there's a lot to think about
It
tonight
is.
on the drive home.
Think about the Gadsden. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
A lot of people would have gone broke because your farm was worth nothing if you couldn't farm it and you couldn't build on it.
Back in 1894, Congress passed the Carey Act. It would grant each state 1 million acres of desert land if that land could be irrigated and farmed within 10 years. Twin Falls was prime location for such an endeavor, with local entrepreneurs I.B. Perrine and steel magnate and multi-millionaire Frank Buell joining together to tap the Snake River and funnel water to farmers. Well, tapping into a seemingly endless supply seemed to solve the big problem of how to populate a desert. However, that actually created another problem that for years farmers just couldn't figure out until they did. 100 years ago this year. It took a renegade and some TNT, and the solution was something most Twin Falls residents don't even realize is just about 10 feet under their feet. There are more than 1 million acres of irrigated farmland in the Magic Valley. Without water, Twin Falls, with its combination of cultivation and cul-de-sacs, wouldn't be what it is today. But with it, it almost wasn't either. Brian Olmsted's roots in Twin Falls run 4 generations deep. But there were some things about his hometown. We'll follow you.
Okay, yeah.
Even he didn't know about.
So I'd always heard about these myths of the tunnels my whole life. There's a couple spots here that are kind of head bonkers for me, but just keep your eyes open. But I never really thought it was real until I went to work for the canal company.
That was nearly 25 years ago.
You know, you always had the stories about hobos that lived in them, and you know that there were murderers and everything else. This one goes just about 2,000 feet, a little under a half a mile.
These tunnels weren't created by chance. They were forced into this lava rock.
You see that?
For a reason.
That's a well that they drilled to bring air in to the tunnel.
For that reason, you have to go back to about the time Brian's great-grandfather made the Magic Valley his home.
Yeah, yep.
In 1904.
And you were buying land on a promise that next year we're going to have you water. And
it was a promise made to a lot of people.
It wasn't called the Idaho Trail. They couldn't wait to get out of here because Oregon had water.
Twin Falls would get water when that commitment was kept in 1905. The completion of the Milner Dam on the Snake River and the subsequent canals opened the gates for irrigating thousands of acres of future farmland.
If you had been here in 1903 and come back in 1906, it would have seemed like magic to see, what was growing in the fields at the time.
But the illusion would reveal itself within a few years.
Yeah, by 1911, they were aware that they had a problem.
Jim Gentry is a local historian.
And I'm kind of fascinated in terms of local history, in terms of how problems are dealt with.
The problem Twin Falls farmers were dealing with in the 1910s?
Just too much water.
How could that be possible in a high desert landscape of lava rock and sagebrush? Well, when farmers on the south side of the Snake River found ways to bring water to their fields, they assumed what wasn't absorbed by the crops would filter underground and eventually come out the porous canyon walls, just like it did on the north side. What they didn't realize was just about 4 feet below the surface was a thick and pretty solid layer of lava rock.
It did not drain, the water did not drain the way they had anticipated, and so it created a real problem for them.
Several months into the growing season, the water had nowhere to go but back up.
So it just built pressure and pressure, and then it just came up, just bubbling up everywhere out of the lava and then up through the soil. By 1911, the groundwater had risen so high that there were farms just turning into swamps.
By that time, nearly 150,000 acres around Twin Falls was being used for farming, a small percentage of which was succumbing to seepage.
By 1913, there were about 500 acres that could not be cultivated.
500 acres?
500
Doesn't seem like a lot.
But it kept growing more.
Digging drainage ditches and wells, the Twin Falls Canal Company was able to reclaim a few acres at a time. But they couldn't keep the drainage problem contained.
Well, the issue was that in an area that seemingly had an unlimited amount of water in a good sense, it ended up being an unlimited of water in the bad sense in terms of drainage.
Then, in 1924, Burton Smith, the newly named general manager of the canal company, decided to take a different tact with a piece of property just above Rock Creek Canyon.
If a deep trench will drain, maybe 40 acres, then if we can blast a tunnel underneath and drill wells down to it, we can maybe drain a whole square mile at a time.
Smith asked the canal company board for permission to try a tunnel. He was denied. He did it anyway. Blasts of dynamite shook the city of Twin Falls. Before long, those dry run reverberations would eventually hit pay dirt.
When they started blasting back in there, the ground above just went and it drained.
With water passing through the sporadic cracks in the rock and random wells drilled from the surface,
That's one of the wells, and that will be producing water later.
this first tunnel
I think we're 1,100 feet now.
would soon drain about 1,000 acres of farmland, with 3.2 million gallons of water a day dropping into Rock Creek Canyon. What proved to be the perfect solution to their problem,
They had 8 tunnels going, I think, within a couple of years of that.
made possible because of an experiment by a mutineer manager.
And that story is popular because it fits our sense of Western individualism and not letting the bureaucracy hold you back.
And that's the tale of how these tunnels
Pretty much, yeah.
saved Twin Falls.
The reason it saved Twin Falls is that without those tunnels, the land would have become worthless.
Well, that first tunnel, known then as the All Tunnel because of who owned the property above, became known as the Fish Hatchery Tunnel because the water coming out of it, was filtered, 58 degrees, and perfect conditions for a fish hatchery, which they built below in Rock Creek Canyon. That led to dozens more tunnels being dug by professionals, more expertly carved this time over the years, which would feed several other canyons like Dry Creek, Dead Man's Gulch, Cedar Draw by Filer, and Mud Creek by Buell. This took about 30 years to get this completed. Brian Olmsted says it takes the water about 2 months into the growing season to work its way down into the tunnels, so that by the fall, most tunnels are running about knee deep. Brian also said some of that they can re-deliver to farmers to extend the growing season on low water years. He helped historian Jim Gentry write his new book called The 51 Tunnels That Saved Twin Falls. Now, those tunnels, they're not open to the public, but we were lucky enough to get a tour. When I say we, I mean my photographer, Kevin Esslinger, and I. Except Kevin followed Brian all the way to the end of that fish hatchery tunnel, all 1,828 feet of it. I did not. Me in closed spaces, we do not do so well together. But Kevin, he did leave me behind with a camera about 300 feet from the entrance. If you can't go,
Kevin has been gone for 30 minutes. I'm stuck here. About 100, 150 yards to the entrance. I don't know where they are. It's been 30 minutes. It's now 2 o'clock. Kevin and I separated about 40 minutes ago. And he's somewhere way up there. I don't know where. I'm not going to the bathroom. It's cold in here. You can see your breath. Clothes are sticking to them, getting splattered by water off the side of the walls. 40 minutes. No! There's no echo. There's no echo. It goes nowhere. It's dead. It's dead in here. Dead in here. I see a light coming this way. Hooray! We may be safe.
Okay, so we shot that story a while ago. I'd forgotten I had recorded those while I was all alone in the tunnel, by the way. Did I relieve myself in that tunnel? Look, it's not my proudest moment, but I was there for nearly an hour just by myself. Not one of my proudest moments, as I said. Good news is that water, it no longer feeds the fish hatchery.
All right, so here's our high temperatures so far for today. We've been in the mid 80s. Hey, it's been a drop from some of those 90s that we've had, but 85 for Boise, Ontario 88, Caldwell 83, Nampa with 84 degrees for the high, 82 degrees for Twin Falls. Very, very nice in the mountains right now. 60s and 70s, right around 70 degrees for the high temperature. Things are going to change as we look ahead here. And these numbers, of course, at this particular time are kind of, well, as you look ahead, especially not so much for the weekend, but getting into the first part of next week, these numbers are in question right along through here. But I did want to point this out to you, and we made this into a first alert weather weekend because of what has the possibility of some extreme heat, even starting out on Saturday and Sunday, but then possibly even getting hotter. And it just depends on how quick that ridge moves in, coming in over the northwest, as to if this is going to be hotter than that into Saturday and Sunday. But just to let you know, there's a change coming our way. And as you look at these temperatures, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday looks pretty good. So take a break on those before some of the heat comes into the area. And our actual 7-day forecast, we've got sunshine, looks like some very pleasant weather. And then by the time you get into Friday and Saturday, heat's going to start to really develop right along through here. That's why we have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, first alert weather days. It kind of bookmarks the 7-day forecast, so you know there is a change. And if you need to, make preparations. Some of that heat could be coming our way.
All right, welcome back. Let's get to your comments from today's show. This one about the Cherie Buckner Webb license plate, the Too Great for Hate. So we got the snake plate that helps gun owners, but no hearing on the Idaho is Too Great for Hate license plate sponsored by Cherie Buckner Webb. That sounds about right. Well, there was a hearing, actually. In 2020, that bill went to the House floor and failed 30-32. Apparently, the Republican caucus went into a meeting, came out, no debate, but then failed to send along that plate to the next. Let's get to the next message, by the way. Let's see if I can get this thing to work again. New technology. Here we go. Kudos to the legislature for protecting kids from pornography. I hope they now turn their attention to protecting kids from gun violence, says Lori. Isn't Idaho supposed to be the least regulated state? So much for the government staying out of our lives, says B&B. Did someone tell Speaker of the House Mike Johnson he'll not be coming to Idaho soon, says Chuck in Boise. This is about the Pornhub pulling out of the state of Idaho. I guess if his son always keeps tabs on him, though, he won't have to worry about it anyway. That's kind of how that joke goes. But thanks for sending that in, Chuck. Brian, they shut the water off to the fish hatchery because someone used it as a urine. That's not true, Tracy. That's not true. I know that for a fact. I don't remember why they shut it down, but I know that's not true. It wasn't me. We'll see you tomorrow.